Is Ukraine the third most corrupt country in the world? Let's play narrative counter and take an objective view of this question, as I'm sure many of you that are out there and a bit more in tune with current events have probably already seen that one. We're going to focus specifically on the origins of the third most corrupt country narrative here, and we're also going to examine a few different time frames of sources. Now, it's important to note that any sources used after Russia's invasion since February will likely be skewed either for or against Ukraine, largely dependent upon which crack dealer or news outlet you decide to watch. First, let me help you understand my background and why I think I might be able to speak to this. Before we start, though, I need to drop 60 seconds for our sponsor, Zydax. I've been building my own PCs for a while, and I've sponsored or personally built over $40,000 worth of PCs for veteran charity in just the last few years. Now, that might not be a big number for some, but that's 23 US veterans that now have a PC. I only say that to help you understand that I've seen a thing or two when it comes to custom PCs going wrong during the build phase. Zydax systems are hand-built in the US with US-only tech support, and their QC is top-notch, which removes the guessing game on your part with whether or not it's a motherboard or another component problem when it won't boot. If there is something wrong with your new PC after you get it, they have a lifetime warranty on parts and labor. So as an example, if your GPU fails on month 13 and the manufacturer's 1-year warranty is up, they've got you 100% covered. They do lots of custom work too. So if you're looking for a sweet RGB setup or even etching, they've got it. Check out the link below or in the card above for a PC from Zydax. Now, during the latter part of my military career, I held the distinction of being an information operations planner, chief, and military deception planner. As a part of that job, the U.S. Army spent a lot of time and money teaching me about how the cognitive space works as it relates to perception. More specifically, the Army spent time and money teaching me to take advantage of pre-existing biases to solidify what's known as a desired effect. A desired effect could be anything from having the enemy stop doing something or start doing something, or having a populace support something. Options at my disposal for what are known as observables, or events, items, or other things that are observed by my target audience to achieve that desired effect, can include everything and anything from leaflets to kinetic events and windfalls. Find $20 on the ground, that's a windfall. Nowadays, I spend a lot of my time reviewing and analyzing combat footage with the rest of the Funker 530 team. Now that we've covered my background, let's dive in a bit and see if we can dissect the question of corruption in Ukraine currently. Most pro-Russian and even neutral witnesses to Russia's invasion of Ukraine cite Ukraine's corruption as a primary reason for not being generally supportive of American or even larger Western aid to Ukraine. Remember, we're focused specifically on one narrative here. There are other narratives such as localized corruption, which is more at the local leader level, being generally supportive of or identifying directly as Nazis. Those might be covered in a different video. That's not the focus here. Let's take a look directly at the source of the third most corrupt country narrative. In 2012, an organization known as Ernst & Young identified Ukraine as one of the top 3 most corrupt nations in the world. The other 2 included on that list were Colombia and Brazil. The process for Ernst & Young to put together this report, not saying it's good or bad, just laying it out there, was, and I quote, to interview 1,758 company executives across 43 countries to gauge their perspectives on the current prevalence of bribery, fraud, and other corruption and attitudes towards practices that might run afoul of anti-corruption rules. Again, that was a direct quote. I wanted to read that report. Now here's the problem. The 2012 survey itself can't be found on Ernst & Young's website. If you find it, great. Here are my socials. Send it to me, and I'd love to read it. Let's talk about problem number 1, time. Time can't be bent. If it could, I'd go back and I'd ask Mrs. Nosel to let me take Algebra 2 a third time so I could get into college. But I can't. 2012 is now over a decade ago. Time doesn't necessarily fix all things, though. So let's look at some other sources. Remember, we're only looking at the third most corrupt nation theme here. Also in 2012, though, Transparency International, check the description below for a link to their site, published their yearly report on corruption across the public sector in 176 countries. I know you're hanging on the edge of your seat here, aren't you? Ukraine ranked 144th, tied with Syria, out of a total of 174 tallies. Yeah, I know I said 176 countries, and it still stands. You've got ties in there and such. The deal with Transparency International's report is that the higher the placement, the more corruption. Position 1 is low corruption. Position 5 million theoretically would be all the corruption. That being said, we're a whole 30 off of the top 3 here. We could theoretically stop this video right here and defeat the third most corrupt country narrative, but we won't. Again, the goal of this video is to not say whether or not Ukraine is corrupt, because corruption ultimately, and hopefully at the end of this video you understand this, is a scale, not black and white. There's corruption in every country. Its scale is what we're focused on at a very high level here. Let's walk these numbers forward from 2012 on using Transparency International. Quick sources note here. I chose to use Transparency International because of how generally easy it was to grab their data. I'm looking at you, Ernst & Young. Where are your reports? How do I get them? Thank you. In 2013, Ukraine once again ranked 144th out of a total of 177 countries this time. In 2014, Ukraine ranked 142nd out of a total of 175 countries. 2015, Ukraine ranked 130th of 168 countries. 2016, Ukraine ranked 131st of 176. 2017, Ukraine ranked 130th of 180 this time. 2018, Ukraine ranked 120th of 180. 2019, Ukraine ranked 126th of 180, so we've lost a couple points. And 2020, we're now at 117th of 180. In 2021, Transparency International stopped ranking by countries and only uses their scores out of a total score of 100, 0 being the most corrupt, 100 being the least. Now, Ukraine lost a point from 2020 to 2021, going from 33 to a score of 32. Again, reminding you, higher is better. They're in the company of Eswatini and just 1 point behind Egypt at that score. They beat Mexico by 1 point, though, just so everybody's tracking. The highest ranking country for the least corruption in 2022 was a tie between Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand with a score of 88. The lowest ranking was South Sudan with a score of 11. Syria and Somalia get an honorable mention for each scoring 13. For a frame of reference, the United States has a score of 67 in 2021, the UK of 77, and Australia of 77 as well. For another frame of reference, there's a single year mentioned above in which Russia ranks better from a corruption perception standpoint than Ukraine. Corruption perceptions. Russia takes advantage of the pre-existing fact that historically, and although corruption perception is falling in regards to Ukraine, that there's any at all by enabling negative bias. Ukraine does the same. It's a standard TTP for information warfare. To not recognize that heartstrings are being tugged on would be doing yourself a disservice. To not recognize the overuse of words like unprovoked
and unjustified attack on Ukraine
from official sources is also doing you a disservice, though. What did we solve today? Absolutely nothing. Did I say that Ukraine wasn't corrupt? No. Did I say that Russia was corrupt? No. Corruption's a scale that's oftentimes measured by subjective or qualitative means. Ernst & Young over a decade ago had their scale, their criteria for corruption perception, and ranked Ukraine the third worst in the world of 40-something countries. This is a much smaller sample size. Transparency International has their own scale, measuring perceptions of corruption, and ranked them no higher than the top 30. A different way to look at that is top 25%. Ukraine is in the top 25% of corrupt countries, and we've just established another narrative. You can make data say whatever you'd like it to say. Does this video provide any kind of support to Transparency International? No. I don't know a whole lot about Transparency International. I don't know much about Transparency International's background, their own level of corruption as an organization, and nor do I care. That's not the point of all this. I'm not telling you to trust that they're the 30th or the 3rd. I'm providing more data for you. Lastly, does all this mean that you should blindly support Ukraine as a nation? No, not necessarily, not unless you want to. Is there corruption in Ukraine? Yes. Does that warrant what's taking place? No. No country deserves to have its territory forcibly taken, its citizen non-combatants purposefully targeted and killed, or its men's balls chopped off. That's it for this episode. Like, sub, bell. Stay informed.